Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Hare Hare. World can live. It's the Prabhupada spent much of the day out of doors, under the persimmon tree about 100 feet from the house. There he would sit and read at a low table one of the men had built. Often he would look up from his reading and gaze across the deep valley to the distant ridge where the forest met the sky. We read this yesterday. In the late afternoon, devotees would gather under the persimmon tree with Prabhupada, sitting and talking with him until after sunset. They saw Prabhupada's living with them as a practical demonstration of New Vrindavan's importance. If he, the greatest devotee, could be satisfied living simply and chanting Hare Krishna in this backwoods setting, then they should follow his example. Comparing New Vrindavan to the Vrindavan in India, Prabhupada said that New Vrindavan was in some ways better, since Vrindavan, India, was now congested with worldly men. 500 years ago, the Goswami followers of Lord Caitanya had excavated the sites of Krishna's pastimes in Vrindavan, and only pure devotees had lived there. But in recent years, Vrindavan had become a place for materialists and impersonalists. New Vrindavan, however, should admit only those who are spiritually inclined. In Vedic society, Prabhupada said, everyone had been sanctified to live like this, in a small village beside a river. Factories were unnecessary. Prabhupada wanted this Vedic way of life for the entire world, and New Vrindavan could serve as a model for the benefit of those masses. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So reading from Sri Caitanya Charitamrta, Madhya Lila, chapter 19, text 154. This chapter is entitled The Lord Instructs Srila Rupa Goswami. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Sri Caitanya, Jaya Nityananda, Jaya Dvaita Chandra, Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Not sure how we do this. Do we do word by word and then recite the verse, or? Okay, that looks fairly straightforward. Tabiyaya tabupare gokula vrindavana. Krishna Chandra kalpa vrikshe kare arohana. Tabiyaya tadupara gokula vrindavana. Krishna Charana Kalpa Vriksha Kare Arohana. Tabe Yaya Tadupari Goloka Vrindavana. Krishna Charana Kalpa Vrikshe Kare Arohana. Tabe Yaya Tadupari Goloka Vrindavana. Krishna Charana Kalpa Vriksha Kare Arohana. Tabe Yaya Tadupari Goloka Vrindavana. Krishna Charana Kalpa Vriksha Kare Arohana. Tabiyaya Tabiyaya Goloka Vrindavana. Krishna Charana Kalpa Vriksha Kare Arohana. Anyone else? You look like you're ready to do it. Just go ahead. Tabiyaya Tadupari Goloka Vrindavana. Krishna Charana Kalpa Vriksha Kare Arohana. Tabiyaya Tadupari Goloka Vrindavana. Krishna Kalpa Kalpa Vriksha Kare Arohana. Tabe thereafter. Yaya goes. Pari to the top of that spirit, the spiritual sky. Goloka Vrindavan. To the planet known as Goloka Vrindavan, where Krishna lives. Krishna Charana. The lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Kalpa Vrikshe. On the desire tree. Kare Arohana. Climbs. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Being situated in one's heart and being watered by Shravana Kirtana, the bhakti creeper grows more and more. In this way, it attains the shelter of the desire tree of the lotus feet of Krishna, who is eternally situated in the planet known as Goloka Vrindavan, in the topmost region of the spiritual sky. Please repeat. Being situated in one's heart and being watered by Shravana Kirtana, the bhakti creeper grows more and more. In this way, it attains the shelter of the desire tree of the lotus feet of Krishna, who is eternally situated in the planet known as Goloka Vrindavan, in the topmost region of the spiritual sky. Purport. In the Brahma Samhita 537, it is said, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavitabhis Tabirya Eva Nijarupataya Kalabi Goloka Eva Nivesat Lakyatma Bhutto Govindamari Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. He resides in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, who resembles his own spiritual figure and who embodies the ecstatic potency, Hladini. Their companions are her confidants, who embody extensions of her bodily form and who are imbued and permeated with ever blissful spiritual rasa. End of quote. In the spiritual world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has expanded himself by his spiritual potency. He has his eternal form of bliss and knowledge, Sat Chitananda Vigraha. Everything in the Goloka Vrindavan planet is a spiritual expansion of Sat Chitananda. Everyone there is of the same potency, Ananda Chinmaya Rasa. The relationship between the Supreme Personality of Godhead and his servitor is Chinmaya Rasa Krishna, and his entourage and paraphernalia are of the same Chinmaya potency. In this way, the Supreme Personality of Godhead has expanded throughout the spiritual world, and when the Chinmaya Rasa potency expands through the material potency, it becomes all-pervading. The idea is that although the Supreme Personality of Godhead exists on his own planet, Goloka Vrindavan, he is also present everywhere. Andantara sta paramam manu chintara asta. I'll try that again. Andantara sta paramanu chiyantarastam. He is present within all the universes, although they are innumerable, and he is also present within the atom. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridideshi arjuna tishtati. He is also present within the heart of all living entities. This is his all-pervasive potency. Goloka Vrindavan is the highest planet in the spiritual world. In order to go to the spiritual world after penetrating the covering of the material universe, one must penetrate Brahmaloka, the spiritual effulgence. Then one can come to Goloka Vrindavan planet. There are also other planets in the spiritual world called Vaikuntha planets, and on these planets, Lord Narayan is worshipped with awe and veneration. On these planets, Shantaraj is prevalent, and some of the devotees are also connected with the Supreme Personality of Godhead in Dasyaras, the mellow of servitorship. As far as the mellows of fraternity is concerned, in the Vaikuntha Ras is represented by Gaurava, Sakya. I have trouble with the italics. Friendship. Let me start again. As far as the mellow of fraternity is concerned, in Vaikuntha, the rasa is represented by Gaurava, Sakya, friendship in awe and reverence. The other fraternity rasa exhibited is as Vishramba, friendship in equality, is found in the Goloka Vrindavan planet. Above that is service to the Lord in Vatsalya Ras, parental love, and above that is the relationship with the Lord in Madhurya Ras, conjugal love. These five rasas are fully exhibited in the spiritual world in one's relationship with the Lord. Therefore, in the spiritual world, the Bhakti Kripa finds its resting place at the lotus feet of Krishna. End of the purport. So I'll read the translation again. Being situated in one's heart and being watered by Shravana Kirtana, the Bhakti Kripa grows more and more. In this way, it attains the shelter of the desire tree of the lotus feet of Krishna, who is eternally situated in the planet known as Goloka Vrindavan, in the topmost region of the spiritual sky. Oh my God. So we've been talking the last several verses about the creeper of devotional service and how it becomes established and watered and how it grows. And previous verses, we understand that one receives the seed of devotional service when he comes in contact with the pure devotee. Pure devotee plants that seed in the heart of the devotee. And when the person receives that seed, he should become a gardener and take good care of the seed. He should water it by Shravana Kirtana. We know that as being hearing and chanting. He should weed the creeper just as a gardener would weed a garden by getting rid of unwanted things within the heart and nartas. And also he should protect the creeper from outside influences such as animals or whatever. And we protect that creeper by not committing offenses to devotees. If one commits offenses to devotees, then the creeper becomes crushed by what is called the mad elephant, or the mad elephant disease. So nothing can be more detrimental to the devotional creeper than offenses to other devotees. Krishna just will not tolerate that. So we have to be very careful in our dealings with devotees if we want the creeper to grow and flourish. As one waters the creeper by Shravana Kirtanam, hearing and chanting, then it grows more and more until it penetrates the covering of the material universe and attains the Goloka Vrindavan planet, the topmost region of the spiritual sky. So we can understand that by coming in contact with the pure devotee, by his causeless mercy, somehow or other we receive that creeper. We receive the seed of the creeper. And Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, that out of many millions of people who take to spiritual life, hardly one knows him in truth. But by receiving the seed of the creeper of devotional service, watering it carefully, keeping the weeds out, by getting rid of unwanted things in the heart, and protecting it from any outside influences by not committing offenses to devotees, then the creeper will flourish gradually. If you ever watch a plant grow, you can sit there all day and look at it, and you won't see it growing. But there's no doubt that it is growing, because if you come back in a week or two, you can see that it has actually grown. So when we nourish our devotional creeper, we shouldn't expect immediate results. It's a gradual process. It takes faith and it takes patience. Often devotees will say, well, I don't feel like I'm making any advancement in spiritual life. And because I think, especially in modern society, we're very much wanting immediate result. But I often tell devotees, well, look at the back of your hand. They look at the back of their hand and say, can you see your fingernails growing? And they say, no. I say, well, that doesn't mean they're not growing. So likewise, we may sometimes feel like we're not making any advancement in Krishna consciousness. But just because we can't see it or we don't feel it doesn't mean that it's not happening. The main thing is that we have faith in the process of Shravana Kirtanam, and then the creeper will grow nicely if it's protected. It says here, Goloka Vrindavan is the highest planet in the spiritual world. And in order to go to the spiritual world after penetrating the covering of the material universe, one must penetrate Brahmaloka, the spiritual effulgence. So sometimes persons will become spiritually advanced, and the creeper will go as far as Brahmaloka or the spiritual effulgence, and they'll think that this is where I want to be. They don't realize there's anything further, and they're happy just to be located in the impersonal Brahmajyoti. But there's actually the spiritual planets which are higher than that. And this purport explains that there are different rasas. There's 5 major rasas or relationships that we can have with Krishna. And I think there's 7 sub-relationships. And Srila Prabhupada lists them in the purport one by one. My understanding is that basically Dasharath, which is the second one, contains also the relationship of Sankhya-Ras, which is neutrality. And then, I'm sorry, not Sankhya, Shantaras. Shantaras, yeah. Which is neutrality. And then Sankhya-Ras, which is friendship, contains the first 2 rasas. And then Vatsalya-Ras contains the first 3, and then all of them are contained within Madhurya-Ras. And Srila Prabhupada explains different types of rasas in the fraternity or the rasa of friendship. And it can be with awe and veneration, or it can be also with friendship and equality. And Krishna appreciates friendship and equality probably more than he appreciates awe and veneration. We read that in the translation to the Damodar Astakam, the 3rd verse. I can't recite the translation off the top of my head, but I do happen to have it right here in my pocket, so I'll tell you what that says. It's pertinent for this time of year. If I can find it. So we're praying to Lord Damodar. And by such childhood pastimes as this, he is drowning the inhabitants of Gokula in pools of ecstasy and is revealing to those devotees who are absorbed in knowledge of his supreme majesty and opulence that he is conquered only by devotees whose pure love is imbued with intimacy and is free from all concepts of awe and veneration. With great love, I again offer my obeisances to Lord Damodar hundreds and hundreds of times. So we're understanding from that translation that Krishna is more attracted when we are relating to him in friendship, maybe on an equal level or even a superior level, as a parent or a guardian. As a parent or a guardian, he's relating to Mother Yashoda by being mischievous. First he cracks the pot, takes out the yogurt that Mother Yashoda is churning, and then he disappears. She can't find him. She comes back, the pot is broken, and she understands, well, this child must have some intelligence because he knows that he's done something wrong, and now he's gone to avoid punishment. He's disappeared. So she searches around for him. She finds him sitting on a grinding mortar, and he's also got butter from another pot, and he's feeding it to the monkeys. And then when she gets the stick to chastise him, he starts running away from her, kind of like playfully. It seems like he's running in fear, but he's actually not running in fear. He's actually playfully running from Mother Yashoda. And then she tries to bind him to the mortar. And no matter how many ropes she gets, it's still 2 inches too short. She spends all day getting ropes and very frustrated. And finally he decides, well, she loves me a lot, so I'll just be bound by her love. And as Mahatma Prabhu explained, he was finally bound by the hair tie in her hair, very short. So that's how Krishna likes to relate with his devotees. Of course, awe and reverence is there. When we are worshiping the deity, it should be an awe and reverence. And then higher than that, of the parental love, is conjugal love. And it says, these rasas are fully exhibited in the spiritual world in one's relationship with the Lord. Therefore, in the spiritual world, the Bhakti Lata Kripa finds the resting place at the lotus feet of Krishna. So when the Bhakti Lata penetrates the covering of the material universe and attains the spiritual world, it says it finds a resting place there at the lotus feet of Krishna. So we can understand that devotional service may seem difficult when we're here in the material world, but actually it's a benediction upon us. We should take that as being a privilege that we're allowed to serve Krishna. Krishna is manifesting himself present everywhere. We understand that the temple room itself is a manifestation of Lord Balaram. So if we're asked to clean the temple room, on the material level, that may seem like, well, I don't want to scrub the floor. I don't want to dust the cobwebs or whatever. But on a spiritual level, we're actually maintaining Lord Balaram's manifestation. Devotees sometimes ask, well, if Balaram is the temple room, how are we to walk on the floor? Aren't we walking on Balaram? The understanding is that Lord Balaram, as the original spiritual master, Sankarshan, is supporting us by letting us walk on the temple room, also giving us shelter and protecting us, not only from material elements, but spiritually we're protected here. So we should take shelter of Lord Balaram, Lord Krishna, and devotees. So I can end there. Are there any questions, comments?
Haribol, thank you, Prabhu. You quoted this verse at the start, out of many endeavouring for perfection, that one may actually, many millions of men, one may endeavour for perfection, out of so many, one may actually know me in truth. Like the rarity of devotional service. And again, later in that chapter, it states, one is free from all sinful reactions, then they can begin to engage in devotional service. But then this idea of like I've heard when we receive the Prabhupada's books, this is us coming in touch with a pure devotee. So we're receiving the seed of devotional service here. And I even heard, there's one conversation I heard quoted, one devotee was asking Prabhupada, we see that unless you take initiation from a bona fide spiritual master, you'll not go back to Godhead. This is what it says. So what's the use of giving out so many books? Surely we should get people to come. And Prabhupada looks at him and says, everyone who takes one of my books, they're initiated by me.
Okay.
So I was sort of wondering, like, you see the two different things. One sense is very, very rare, and we have to be free from all sins to receive this. But also it's like, what Prabhupada is doing seems to be contrary to that.
Well, we can take the word initiation to mean several things. When one receives a book from a devotee, one of Srila Prabhupada's books, it may mean that initially he's being presented the book. He's being presented the opportunity to engage in the process of devotional service. So he receives the book, and so now his devotional path has been initiated. In other words, he's starting his devotional path, even just touching the book. Or even if you give a book to somebody and they don't want it, and then they give it to somebody else. So now they've actually distributed the holy name or the philosophy, so they are actually getting benefit. And these books can sit on the shelf for decades, and then you never know, someone is going to pick it up and read it. So when we give out a book, or if we preach the philosophy to someone, even though they may not be receptive, they've been initiated into the process, which is different from when you take formal initiation, diksha initiation. That's when you actually are willfully surrendering to the spiritual master. So one may receive a book and it's like they're initiated initially, but not until they accept the bona fide spiritual master and receive the bhakti lata bij from the spiritual master does that actually begin to flourish. Doesn't mean that one receives a book and becomes associated with Krishna consciousness, and then the next year they become initiated or something. It may be a gradual process, just as a creeper grows very gradually. Like I said, we have to have patience and we have to have faith. And many of us are further along the path, or some of us are further along the path than others, even when we start Krishna consciousness, because we know that the process of devotional service is carried over from lifetime to lifetime. And when we start in this life, we pick up where we left off in the last life. There's no loss or diminution, as Krishna says, on this path. So, we may be, distributing the holy name or giving out Srila Prabhupada's books, and we don't know actually who we're giving it to, It may be someone who's very spiritually advanced, but in this lifetime, because of material desires that are still within the heart, they've taken birth and maybe not ready to completely surrender. And so Krishna then reminds them of what their desires are as super soul, and gives the opportunity for the living entity to work out their desires. I've heard it explained that our material desires or whatever reside in our heart. And as we pick up the process of devotional service, especially chanting the Maha Mantra, then our heart becomes purified, and those desires don't immediately go away. They actually take shelter in the mind. And in the mind, then we have the opportunity to rid ourselves of those material desires, either through our intelligence or maybe even acting upon them. Srila Prabhupada did say that, someone was asking, well, who is actually your disciple? And Srila Prabhupada said, anybody that's acting according to the discipline that I've given is my disciple, meaning that they chant at least 16 rounds a day and follow the 4 regulative principles. That's the discipline that he's given us. And he did say that if someone is following that discipline, then they're considered to be his disciple. So we know that Srila Prabhupada is Jagat Guru, and his representatives are now carrying on the tradition that he's established here in the West. And so, it's definitely necessary to accept initiation from a living, bona fide spiritual master. So, getting back to your question about initiation, we become initiated by first receiving the mantra or receiving the book, and then we have to take initiation formally and actually surrender willfully rather than just getting a book and whatever. Does that answer your question? You look puzzled.
I guess just going back to this idea of that we hear on one hand how rare it is and how we need to be already so elevated in order to receive the Bhakti Lata Bij. But then also, because of this, like the Sankirtan movement, it's like disregarding all these qualifications.
Yeah, the golden age of Kali.
Yeah.
So Lord Chaitanya's movement, freely distribute. There are no qualifications. Nothing is required. He's just freely distributing love of Godhead and distributing the holy name, the chanting of the holy name, the Sankirtan movement. So there's no qualification required. There's no, you don't have to come to any specific level. So freely, it's free for the taking. For those who are ready to take it, you can take it. If you're not ready to take it, this movement's going to go on for another, 10,000 years. So what is your question?
The real question I'm trying to ask is when does it come down to the will of the individual? Because when you get in touch with this mercy, you start to you hear the holy name, you hear Harinam, you get a book put in your hands, you might be completely against that whole idea, but still that mercy is sort of almost being forced upon you. But still it will take effect.
Yes, it will take effect. Like I said, it requires faith and it requires patience. So the seed may be growing. Sometimes we see plants, they grow where they're not planted. The seeds blow in the wind and they end up somewhere, and then that seed takes root, not specifically planted by a gardener, but the seed takes root. It may grow more slowly because it's not being cared for. It may be covered over by weeds, and those weeds are not being pulled. It may grow more slowly because it's not being watered properly. But the seed is there, and it will eventually grow. The whole process of Krishna consciousness is to consciously grow that seed. But once the seed is planted, it will reside in the heart, even if it lays dormant. Some seeds, like the cherry tree, for instance, the seed from the cherry tree can lay in the soil for up to 200 years and still be viable. It can still grow after that. So the seed can lie dormant in the heart, and at some point in time, when the conditions are right, then that seed will begin to grow and flourish. The problem is that a lot of times people who take to spiritual life, they reach a certain point and they're satisfied with that. So they may stop watering and tending to the seed because they're happy where it is, but it doesn't reach the ultimate goal. Yes.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. Question: I wonder, why is it that why do we worship in the mood of awe and reverence, and that's not the angle that we're going for in building a relationship with Krishna?
Why do we worship in awe and reverence? Because as we start out, In our devotional life, we understand Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And, we don't immediately come to the stage of bhava, love of Godhead, unconditional love, so on and so forth. We need to develop that. And it's developed by hearing and chanting and worshiping also. There's 7 processes of devotional service. And we can take to those processes and we just don't walk into the temple room and automatically become overwhelmed with ecstatic love. So that has to grow. And we understand that the deity is non-different from Krishna himself. And if Krishna was to show up, we would worship him with awe and reverence. We come together in the morning at Mangalartik. We worship the deity. We sing praise to the spiritual master. And sometimes we may become a little bit lax in that maybe Mangalartik isn't so important, or maybe I'll just show up a little bit late or something like that. Because we don't understand that the deity is actually Krishna himself. We haven't come to that realization. But if we knew that Krishna was going to be on the altar this morning, regardless of how tired we are or how we're feeling, whether we're sick or whatever, we would get out of bed and we would come to the temple. Even we see that when great devotees, advanced devotees come. We don't think, well, I'm a little bit tired, I'm not going to show up, or, whatever, I'll just watch it on video. We're very enthusiastic because we can feel the physical presence of a advanced devotee or a spiritual person coming. But we seem to lack that when the deity is on the altar. We're basically going through the motions as they are prescribed. And that also helps to build love of Godhead. Again, it's a gradual process. We have to start somewhere. So we start with awe and reverence, and we go from there. We hear about or read about the Sahajya community, who they take everything very cheaply. They're dressing up like gopis and they're dancing with someone who's dressed up like Krishna. We even saw that within our movement in the early years. They had this thing in the Los Angeles temple called the Gopi Bhava Club, which was just a little bit off the rails. And when Srila Prabhupada found out about it, he was very, very angry, and he laid down the law that this is not the platform that we're on. We can't just immediately adopt this platform. So we don't take it cheaply, this, ecstatic love for Krishna or this intimate relationship with Krishna. It has to develop. So we develop by starting with hearing and chanting and worshiping the deity in awe and reverence. It's just our constitutional position. And then, we may not even know what our constitutional rasa is until we reach the spiritual world. You hear of devotees going to Radhakund and then some Babaji telling them, well, this is your rasa in Krishna Lila, There was one instance of a devotee in the Bombay temple, I believe. You can read it in Giriraj Maharaj's book. I forget what the title of the book is, but when they were building the Bombay temple. And there was one devotee who wasn't coming to the morning program or whatever, and they found that he was up in his room practicing peacock calls because some Babaji told him that he's a peacock in Krishna Lila. So he was disregarding the process that the spiritual master had given him and jumping over that. And, we all smile and kind of chuckle because we understand how foolish it is. So that's why we worship in awe and reverence. Does that answer your question? Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Hare Krishna. As we read here in the translation that the Bhakti Lata Bija is watered through Shravana Kirtana, and then it grows more and more. Could you say something about of stagnating stagnating the creeper and not giving it enough water?
Stagnated creeper, not giving
Because you can be you can be initially enthusiastic, and then either there's lots of service, or you just get out of habit to water. it kind of can happen in a gardening as well. It's like you forget to water or whatever.
Yes. Okay. So that does happen. We get so involved in our service day to day that sometimes we put hearing and chanting aside. So Srila Prabhupada has established 16 rounds minimum chanting per day, and attending Srimad Bhagavatam class, and in previous days, evening class, Srimad Bhagavad Gita, as a more or less guarantee that we will at least get a little bit of watering every day. But we should take it further than that. If we become an expert gardener, we have to understand that there's a balance in our spiritual life, and that we have to balance our devotional service, practical devotional service, with hearing and chanting. And hearing and chanting is also devotional service. So we can't concentrate on one and disregard the other. And you'll often find that when devotees seem to be having a little bit of trouble or they're unsteady in their devotional service, it's because they're not hearing and chanting regularly. We shouldn't stop chanting Maha Mantra at 16 rounds a day. I mean, that's the bare minimum. And we should find time to chant a little bit more, to read whenever possible. My practice is here that when I reach 16 rounds, I stop and I read Caitanya Caritamrta in the morning, even if it's just 10 minutes, 10 or 15 minutes, because I know that's a time where I'm not being pulled in other directions, and that I can at least get a little bit of reading from that. And also in the evening, before I take rest, I always like to read from Krishna book. It's very relishable pastimes, easy to understand. It's not deep philosophy, but it's very endearing that we're reading Krishna's pastimes. Even if it's one chapter, even if it's 2 or 3 pages, we should make time to do that. And, during the month of Damodar, we take a vrat to do something extra or whatever. There's no reason we can't take a vrat every month, do something different, or at least, commit ourselves to maybe even reading one verse from Bhagavad Gita, just to get that little bit of watering. Ideally, we want to read as much as possible. When I'm at home in Texas, I have the luxury of not having I wouldn't say a luxury. I'm deprived of having any practical devotional service other than maybe cooking and offering, and maybe offering financial support to the movement. So I have a lot of time for hearing and chanting, and I appreciate that. But what I don't have basically is the association of devotees and the opportunity to do practical service. So when I'm here at Karuna Bhavan, it's just the opposite. I have a lot of association, and I have a lot of opportunity to render practical devotional service. And so I don't read or chant as much as I do when I'm in Texas, but still it's all relishable, So, there is a distinction, but whatever we're practicing helps us to advance. But we need to realize as we mature that if we're not hearing and chanting or watering our kripa enough, that we need to take responsibility, and we need to adjust our program so that we can get that hearing and chanting and watering the kripa. And if we're younger devotees and we're not so mature, then we should take advice from older, more senior devotees that, we should do this, you should do this, even if it's difficult, or even if it means getting up 15 minutes earlier or taking rest 15 or 20 minutes later, that it's essential to our kripa staying, being nourished and staying vibrant, rather than just, you can see that you can have a plant and it doesn't get enough sunshine, or it doesn't get enough water, it's not being nourished. It'll stay there, but it won't grow luxuriantly. But the plant, the kripa that's cared for, even, materially speaking, will flourish when it's given attention. So we have to understand that, we can't just let the kripa of devotional service or love of Godhead just languish in our heart. We have to keep it alive by hearing and chanting, and it's necessary. It's not an optional thing. It's not optional that, okay, well, when I get a chance, or whatever. It needs to be done regularly, and it needs to be done consciously. It needs to be that we understand the necessity for it, and that we make that also a priority in our daily life. Nobody thinks, well, I don't have time to brush my teeth, or I don't have time to bathe, or I don't have time to maintain my bodily, nobody thinks that, we just do it automatically because that's what we do, So likewise, we should take the process of hearing and chanting as that, I don't have time for it. We should view it with, this is something that I do. I have to do it. When I was working with the ISKCON prison ministry, I would get letters from inmates who were trying to advance in Krishna consciousness. And, they were saying, well, there's no service for me. I can't, there's no service that I can do, or, we don't have books. And I'm saying, you can chant Hare Krishna, but also, you can do things